is 6 p.m. Today is Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. We do have a quorum present, and so I would like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District. I want to express my appreciation to everybody being able to juggle their schedules to fit this supplemental meeting, I guess we could call it, in between our regularly scheduled meetings of February and potentially the end of March. Before we begin tonight's business, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the transition that's happening now in our representation in Shelburne on this board. Tim Louts has officially resigned, and Margie Weiner has now taken over as Shelburne's commissioner. She was present at the last meeting, really in an unofficial capacity as a member of the public, but I'm really happy to welcome her now as our fully installed member from Shelburne. I also want to take the moment to express appreciation for Tim's service. He was with us. He served on the board for 12 years, I believe, joining in 2011. In my experience, he always brought to the board sharp insights, genuine concern for the best interest not only of the town he represented, but also for the entire district and all of the constituencies that we serve. And I would say, I know I did, and I think the whole board and the community has definitely benefited from both the vigor and the rigor of his many contributions and participation in board matters over the years. And again, welcome, Margie. You've got big shoes to fill, but we're happy to have you on board and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Paul, I'd just like to second your thoughts regarding Tim. I really always appreciated his input. When I was chair, he always had excellent insight and asked hard questions, but good ones. And so, again, I appreciate his service to our community.
Thank you for that additional comment, Paul. Also, I want to take a moment. I see Bryn is on board here, has joined us. Congratulations to Bryn for her successful, I guess, re-election to the town of the city of Winooski. You know, Bryn, you're an inspiring example of commitment to the community, serving not only your city, but also this board and the entire community. So I think I can say for the whole board, our hats are off to you. I'm very impressed with all that you do, and thank you very much for your service on this board. So with that, we'll now proceed with our regular meeting. The first item on the agenda is the agenda itself. Are there any additions or correct changes requested to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda will be accepted as presented. Second item on the agenda is a public comment period. Are there any members of the public present who wish to address the Board of Commissioners tonight? Present either on Zoom or via the phone? I am hearing none. I'm seeing none. We will then officially close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I am aware there's going to be a request to remove one item from the consent agenda for a little further discussion, that being the legislative updates. Are there any other requests from commissioners to have an item pulled from the consent agenda? Rick. You're muted, Rick.
Realize that just as you were saying it. Sorry. I have a question about the SMI contract.
So let's pull the SMI contract as well. It's important for us to have that discussion, I think. Any other requests?
Just to be clear, I'm the one who requested that the legislative update be pulled off the consent agenda.
Thanks, Paul. Hearing no other requests, the consent agenda, with the exceptions of items 3.6, the process glass management agreement, and 3.7, the legislative updates, the consent agenda is approved. Well, let's follow the order of the consent agenda. So, Rick, could you express your question about the process glass management agreement?
Yes, it had to do with the 20% non-glass residue threshold. Forgive me if I missed this, but it wasn't clear to me what would happen if a load exceeded that. And I also question whether if there was one test load that came in at 20%, are we reasonably confident that there aren't going to be other loads that have a higher percentage?
Josh, Tyler, if you're available to pop on. Great, thanks.
Yeah, the 20% threshold was actually what I set. We came in at about I think it was 11 or 12. So I set the threshold higher so that we wouldn't have any concerns with excessive contamination. And to be, you know, just for clarification's sake, this is the material that doesn't go through our secondary process. So this is material that comes straight out of the building. So it is highly contaminated and it hasn't been screened a second time. But I set it so that we wouldn't run into any problems with any contamination level.
Okay, good.
But to answer, they would most likely have to. My guess would be we talked about it. Typically, they wouldn't be able to process it; they have to throw it away. So there would be some kind of. They wouldn't send it back to us. It's too far of a trip to come back from Connecticut. They would assess us some kind of disposal cost, but that is not clearly defined because I almost doubled our expected contamination threshold.
Okay, thank you.
I actually had another question since this has been pulled from the consent agenda. My question centered on the costs here in the memo that we had in our packet, identified that in these winter months when the quality of the glass is really poor, that we have been paying upwards of $138 a ton, and this agreement would save us some significant money per ton down to $96 per ton. My question then is, in the other months when we have better conditions, what is a normal cost per ton that the district pays?
Great question. We currently pay $15 a ton to be received at the Wickham quarry, and I actually have it on my list to call Tyler Wickham this week to just confirm they're still willing to take it. But it's been a pretty good partnership so far, and as I understand, they are blending certain portions of it into some subbase per ANR specification requirements. But that's who we typically go to with the bulk of our material.
Thanks. Sarah, did you have any other comments you wanted to add on that?
No, but I see Allison has a hand up.
Okay, thank you. Allison.
Yes, so I too had a question more generally about this, and that was, are there plans at the new MRF to have a facility for glass processing that can be entirely indoors or not affected by the weather?
Yes, exactly. That's how the glass portion is being designed, is to be completely contained within the building. The current setup was basically some add-ons, and in order to kind of add that secondary process, the additional cleanup, there was nowhere for us to go but out. So that was why we ended up kind of half in the building and half out of the building. So the new MRF will have everything contained within the four walls.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the glass management agreement?
Margie?
Yeah, and so the 3 years, does that sync up with the new MRF? Is it the 3 years on the SMI contract?
Yes.
Correct.
Allison?
Is there any indication that the cost would increase from the $96 or lower? Is it firm for the 3 years?
Is there a CPI on? Gosh.
No, we didn't CPI it, but again, it's really a 1 year and then 2 1-year extensions. So it is the best and most economically viable and environmentally viable option for our winter. So if they did add a CPI to it, we'd bring it back to the board to discuss, or at least we discussed internally, but there's no CPI on it currently.
And what is that acronym? I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
It's the
Cost.
consumer price index. So it's basically it's inflation.
Got
And it's similar to we would use the Northeast index, the same one that we use to assess the cost of living adjustment, the COLA. So it's through the Bureau of Labor Statistics analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling out the acronyms. We throw them around here, so I appreciate that that call out. Thank you.
So since this has been pulled from the consent agenda and it is a contract to be approved, I think it would be appropriate then for us to take separate and individual action on this item. And there is wording of a resolution in our board packet. If that could be read out, and then we'll, well, actually, we need a motion to approve this or enter into an agreement, I think. First, Sarah, if that could be read into the record, then we'll have our motion. Thank you.
Certainly. Be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners authorizes the Executive Director to enter into an agreement with Strategic Materials, Inc. of Houston, Texas, for a 3-year term commencing March 9, 2023 through March, and I think that should probably say 8, 2026, for the services to manage wintertime glass generated at the CSWD Materials Recovery Facility in accordance with the attached glass recycling service agreement, cost not to exceed $120,000 annually.
So move, Seth Burlington.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second time's
Good
good.
ethics.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Oh, we do have a hand. Yes, Bryn.
It's just one clarification. Scanning, trying to scan quickly. Is there any tonnage minimums that we have to meet? Can you hear me?
I think
There
it's
are-
27
there are no-
tons.
Yeah. They won't exceed 27 tons. So when we load them, they go over our scale, and the Department of Transportation limits are 27 tons of load out. But the amount of tonnage we've set up with them, they'll take whatever we send them. And because we have to send them everything we process in the wintertime, we're set up to take 3 loads a week per the schedule in the contract, but there's no minimum.
Okay,
And I've left room for weather dependent situations if we have to extend out of the 3 months we agreed on.
okay. Thank you.
That's 27 ton, 3 times a week.
Yep.
Okay.
Winter slows down a little bit for glass generation. We crank out about 100 tons a week. 110, I'm sorry.
Other questions or discussion on the motion? I think we're ready then for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The motion is approved. So let's then move on to the legislative updates. Paul Stabler, could you
Yeah,
share with us with your question?
I'm particularly interested in the potential for the expanded model bill. I'd like to get the very latest on that and try to see what Jen thinks in terms of its possibility of passage, whether it'll happen this year or have to cross over and go into next year. And also, has staff thought about the impact on our ability to repay the bond vote and for the new MRF if it were to pass? Thank you.
Sure. Good evening. So the legislators are off this week for town meeting week. Traditionally, they'll return next week, and next Friday is crossover, which is where if a bill has not moved from one body of the legislature to the other body, the Senate to the House or the House to the Senate, wherever it originated, if it hasn't moved by that date, it cannot become law that year. But this is the first year of the biennium, so the bill will continue to be viable until next year to become law. So in terms of H 158, it passed out of the Committee of Environment and Energy last week, 10-1. It's gone over to Ways and Means, where it was taken up on Friday. There was considerable discussion, but they haven't had any testimony on it, or they basically reviewed the bill on that day with the intention of coming back as soon as they return next week on Tuesday and taking it up. So to answer your question, Paul, in terms of will it pass this year, that depends on whether they can move it out of Ways and Means to the floor by next Friday. And I don't have an answer for you on that. It's possible. In terms of the impact of the bill on CSWD's MRF and the viability of paying back the bond, we've done some analysis on what an expansion might do financially to our MRF, because it is pulling out the valuable commodities, including PET and aluminum. It's really hard to estimate exactly what that cost would be, because as we know, the price of these materials goes up and down. And we also don't have a really clear understanding of what the redemption rates will be. So how much people will utilize the redemption centers versus the single stream blue bin system. The way that the bill is being changed, it is being much more aggressive in that the producer responsibility organization that is going to be covering the management of the program will have to meet certain goals, and if they don't meet the goals, eventually the redemption rate will automatically increase. So from 5 cents to 10 cents, or in the case of wine, from 15 to 20. So that said, I think that, eventually we'll see more materials being redeemed versus going into the single stream that are going into our single stream today. My estimation was that it could impact our tip fee, is what I equated it to, based on the tonnage that we would expect, and what the tip fee would have to be increased to cover the loss, was somewhere between $6 and $10 a ton, depending on whether glass wine bottles were in or out. Right now it is in. But again, it really depends on the redemption rates and what the pricing is for all commodities in terms of what our losses are. So it's, yeah.
Have you or will you be giving testimony to the committee?
Yes, I did give testimony to the House Environment and Energy Committee. I will likely be asked to give testimony to the Senate. I don't know about Ways and Means. They will have to draft a fiscal note that's not out yet, that will also will help us see a more clear picture of what the economic impact would be. And then, as stated in my memo, the PRO does have to do an analysis to determine what the impact would be on the recycling system.
And Jen, PRO is Producer
Responsibility Organization. Thank you. Yeah.
So that would be the manufacturer group, or the group of brands, would be responsible for creating an entity, this organization, that would then essentially manage the bottle bill system in the state. So it really is a very big change to how the container deposit system is run in Vermont. And also just, regarding the impacts to the MRF, keep in mind that our MRF takes in, the majority of the material that we take in are paper and fiber products. About 78% of what we process has nothing to do with the bottle bill. And the new MRF is, again, being designed to maximize those fiber products, and then to be able to, if we want to as well, create additional products of fiber, so additional grades that we could sell into the market. We're also looking to specifically capture polypropylene in the new MRF, which has a very strong market and is growing, and we're not doing that right now. We can't, because we're doing things by hand. So we are looking at, when we look at the new MRF, we're looking at different opportunities to be flexible, to adapt to not only changes in marketplaces, but changes in state laws as they may happen. So we certainly have this on our horizon. These containers do represent a small portion of the overall material that come through our facility. And it's not to say it won't have any impact, it will have some, but we're planning different ways to mitigate those impacts.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That definitely helps a lot. I thought it was important to get it out on the record here. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Any other questions from commissioners on this, on the legislative update? I'm hearing none. Since this was just informational, it was part of the consent agenda, but I'm not sure we need any action to officially accept this report at this time. It's been presented to the board. I'm looking to you, Sarah, to see if you would agree that.
I do agree. I think it's just information. I was looking for some clarification on the information.
So I think we're now ready to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is an executive session. The intent is to address this first, and then we're going to be doing the lengthiest part of the meeting will be, of course, the budget after this executive session, and hopefully an action on the MRF contract. But we're ready now to move into executive session. So if we could have the motion read into the record.
Move, Jericho, that we go into, could someone read it? Because we need
I want to get the language right.
lengthy language, Amy.
Yes, I move that the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District go into executive session to discuss the Town of Williston water line and the MRF contract, where premature general public knowledge would clearly place the district, its member municipalities, and other public bodies or persons involved at a substantial disadvantage, and to permit authorized staff, other invited parties, and the Solid Waste District attorney to be present for this session.
So moved, Westford.
Second, Jericho.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to enter the executive session. Before we have a vote on it, I just want to note for Kelton's, there are two items in here, one dealing with the Williston water line and then the MRF contract discussion. Kelton, you're welcome to participate in the first part of this, but as previously discussed, we'd welcome your recusal from the second part of that discussion. That's just for informational purposes for the rest of the board to understand as we enter into executive session. With that, all those in favor of entering into executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We'll now move over to executive session. If you, so we'll entertain a motion to exit executive session.
So moved, Essex.
Thank you.
Second, Westford.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that the board exit executive session and return to public session. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. We are back now in public session. Sarah.
Yes, thank you. So, and Thomas, I would ask that you hop in and help with some language here. We did present into the district's records a contract proposal negotiated between Casella Waste Systems and CSWD for operation of the materials recovery facility for a term beginning March 1st, 2023, and extending through the decommissioning of the current MRF facility. Thomas, is there additional language that we need to present in public session?
I would suggest that the as part of the executive director's presentation that the board acknowledge that the proposed contract be entered into as part of the public record of the Board of Commissioners, as well as the memorandum that was prepared by the executive director, summarizing that the material changes, the new processing fee, the CPI adjustment, in particular, as material changes from the existing contract with the operator of the current materials recovery facility.
Well, as chair of the Board of Commissioners, I will direct the executive director to take those steps to place those documents in the public record. And with that, I believe now we're ready to entertain a motion to approve the contract between the Chittenden Solid Waste District and Casella Waste Systems as described by the executive director.
So move, South Burlington.
Second, Westford.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this contract, which is there any discussion by members of the board? I think then we are ready for the question. All those in favor of approving the contract, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say nay and raise your hand. Abstentions?
Williston.
Thank you. Williston has abstained. I declare the motion has passed and the contract is approved. And again, would like to say publicly, on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and on behalf of the public, thank you very much to Sarah and staff for a very lengthy process with a good outcome, I believe, for the district and for our constituents. So, thank you very much.
I also would just like to express appreciation to Casella for good faith negotiations. They've been a very good partner in our MRF over the years, and I'm still grateful for their involvement.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Now we're, I think we're ready to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the fiscal year 24 budget. Just by way of process, I would like to afford the executive director and staff the opportunity to make a presentation without interruption, unless there's a point of clarification that a commissioner might have to not understanding something. But I would like them to be able to make a full presentation before we open it up to questions. And again, also before opening up to questions, just give the Leslie, as chair of the Finance Committee, an opportunity if she'd like to offer any observations or comments that might benefit the full board's understanding. And then we will turn it over for a deeper discussion. There's a lot of material here, and I think probably some deep discussion we'll be having, certainly centering around pricing, potential fee changes. But I'd like to, again, get this fully presented so we see the full picture and then open it up. So with that understanding, I'll turn it over to you, Sarah, and staff.
Thank you very much, and appreciate, again, so many commissioners being able to adjust your schedules so that we could prepare as full a presentation as possible. There were some last minute adjustments to the budget that we felt were material. So I'm going to share my screen and just run through a quick PowerPoint here. And this happens all the time. What is this place? Okay. Thank you very much. So this is our fiscal year 2024 budget proposal. And this was an experiment in trying to get our budget done sooner rather than later. And actually, I will ask some folks to mute yourselves on mute just in the event that we have some additional noise in the background. So this fiscal year budget, we are budgeting our revenue to be keeping pace with our budgeted expenses. That is the good news. The budget revenue, though, compared to the actual in 22, is showing a significant drop for material sales, which is essentially a result of the MRF. And it's the actuals in 22 for the recycling commodity sales were an anomaly. No one in the industry expected the boom, the very small boom, small but mighty, that we had in 22. And so the budget numbers, when you see them compared to the actual, will seem to be out of whack, but they are actually resetting to what is a more normalized view. So kind of to keep that in mind. And then, again, we're showing some expenses that are increasing against actual fiscal 22, particularly in the administrative costs, which should not be a surprise as we're just about to enter into a new facility, a new office space. And we're also getting back to training and doing some travel associated with training our staff. We've got some new folks on board, but also just ongoing professional development, which is really important. And a reminder too that the next 5 years will continue to be very capital intensive as we're looking at not only a new materials recovery or materials recycling facility, but also some much needed upgrades to our drop-off centers and finishing out the upgrades and to our organics facility as well. So as a reminder for folks who may tune into this later, but also for some of our newer commissioners, these are the sources of our funding and kind of how we allocate the funds across our different programs. So we have 3 main sources of revenue, and that is our solid waste management fee, our user fees or our tip fees, and our material sales. So the solid waste management fee is that $27 a ton that is charged at the Coventry landfill when haulers who collect material in Chittenden County bring that waste to be disposed in the landfill. And the haulers are charged at $27 a ton that is remitted to CFWD as our management fee. And that basically supports our, we call them the support program. So admin, administrative, compliance, finance, outreach, and communications are all supported by that solid waste management fee revenue. The operations programs are funded in large part by revenues generated from tip fees or user fees. So the fees that we charge our customers directly for managing their material directly. So at the drop-off centers, at the MRF, at the environmental depot, at the organics diversion facility, those tip fees are the main source of support for those programs, as well as sales of products. So the sales of their sorted recycling, paint, our local color paint products that we sell, and compost products. And we have another set of programs that we're calling, for lack of a better term, self-funded. And those are essentially either pass-through services like our biosolids program. So our member communities who participate, either have a wastewater treatment plant or can participate in that biosolids program. It's a much smaller subset of our members, and they basically fund themselves. So we are managing their biosolids contract on their behalf, but those monies basically are essentially a pass-through. And then the closed landfill and facility closure. So the closed landfill was kind of pre-funded. When we had the landfill open, monies were taken in to support 30 years of closure on that closed landfill. And then we had to also seed a separate facility closure fund. And that is really in the event that we need to completely close down a drop-off center or the MRF or the depot. And we have to have a certain amount of money in that separate fund dedicated for that service or for that activity. So our first source of revenue, the solid waste management fee, we are not proposing that we increase the fee. It is $27 per ton. Again, as I mentioned, it has remained $27 per ton for the past decade. And I do think that we want to, as a board, engage in a conversation about how we can moderate that fee, and should we start to talk about bringing that fee onto a regular schedule. Lots of costs have increased over the past decade, and that fee has remained the same. So it's one of those funny fees too that we actually want to see it decrease. The goal is to not be generating as much trash being sent to the landfill, so we want to see those revenues go down. And yet, as I mentioned in the previous slide, it does currently fund our support systems, our support programs. So it is a conundrum, and I think it is worthy of board conversation over the coming year. The materials recovery facility, we are transitioning into calling it the materials recycling facility, just to better indicate to the public really what that function is. So we are looking to increase the tip fee to $85 a ton. It's currently at $80 a ton. And that is in direct response to the dramatic increase in the processing fee that we will be paying starting July 1 to Casella. So you can see that currently we're paying about $45 per ton of recycling coming into the MRF for processing, and that will be going up to $70 per ton starting July 1st, and then it will increase in January to just under $74 per ton. The inbound tons are not scheduled to increase, so that's a straight up increase in our costs. And in order to recover and recoup some of those costs, because we're not anticipating that the material sales revenue will increase dramatically, we are looking to increase that tip fee by just $5 per ton. Again, directly related to the increase of that in that contract that was just approved. And thank you very much for that. And it is anticipated that haulers, they may pass that on to customers, they may not. That doesn't always happen, but we also don't control whether or not it does. And our charter does say that when we have solid waste facilities, that they should essentially rely on their user fees or their tip fees for their operation. So this is, again, aimed at keeping these facilities self-supporting. And the organics diversion facility, also looking at a tip fee increase from 65 per ton to 70 per ton on the material coming in, the food scraps coming into the ODF. We do not charge a tip fee for residential leaf and yard debris. So that may be something that the board will want to consider over the course of the year. And you know, you can see in the fiscal 22 actuals, we were practically flat, not needing a subsidy. And in this current year budget, we were looking at about a $200,000 subsidy. That's what that income negative is on the bottom, and essentially the same level on the current proposed budget. And that is also directly related to a loss of tons. So when Casella opened their depackaging facility right next to the MRF, they also took in source separated material that had been previously coming to our compost facility. So we've recovered a good number of those tons, but we are still far below where we were in fiscal 21 and fiscal 22. So we are budgeting for about just under 5,000 inbound food scrap tons. We really would like to be up between 6,000 and 7,000 tons inbound. That would be a good place for us to be. And you know, there is some activity at the legislature and at the Agency of Natural Resources regarding depackaging rules. So this could be changing over the course of this next year, but for right now, we are looking at going back to having a subsidy for this program. Our drop-off centers, we do have an additional supporting memo that I included in the packet regarding drop-off centers in anticipation of having a conversation about pricing here. And so we are proposing in this budget, in order to, again, eliminate the subsidy for the DOCs, we are proposing increasing bag prices to $3 for what we're calling a small bag, $8 for a medium bag, and $11 for a large bag. And what I think I forgot to mention or write in the memo was, before COVID, the small bag was priced at $2.75 a bag. And when we went to through COVID protocols, we wanted to avoid handling coins. So we either went up to a near whole dollar or down to a whole dollar. And the decision was made to go down rather than up to reflect that there was so much uncertainty in the local economy at the time, and we didn't want to add an undue burden to folks who would be struggling and through COVID. So we dropped it down to 2. So really, we would, you know, if we had stuck at that 275, we would only be bringing that smallest bag up to 25 cents. But it does, the reality is we're now at 2 and we're recommending jumping to 3. What this does is it does eliminate the subsidy needed. So you can see the actual in 22 the DOCs needed just under $400,000 in a subsidy. And this current year budget is just over $420,000 in subsidy. It would be the same roughly amount of subsidy needed without a bag increase. And again, we have additional memos supporting what we may see as a conversation to happen further down the road. So I just want to kind of review again those major, the major revenue generating operations. And just like any municipality, we do need to get down to net zero. So this is just again a review of where we're seeing the revenue and the expenses lining up. And then below that line, below the income from operations, the expense line shows the transfers, kind of the in and out of the different reserves to get us down to that net zero. And this is just a few selected items as far as the change compared from 24 to the 23 budget. Again, this is comparing 24 budget to 23 budget. And you can see some of the highlights there. And again, you're noting that the solid waste management fee revenue, we're seeing a decrease or budgeting a decrease. And again, that is the direction we want to go, and we want to reduce waste generation. And I highlighted again a few of the expenses changes, sometimes for a large dollar amount in the example of the materials management increase. And materials management is hauling services, essentially. And then, or percentage increases. So you can see the administrative cost increase is not, overall is not super high, but the percentage is high. So just different ways to look at these different types of increases. But overall, the revenue change, 9%, almost 10%, expenses change just below 9%. Did want to also highlight some staffing changes. Actually, that should be a 1.4, not a 4.4 change. My apologies. So that even though we have a recommending a 7% cost of living adjustment, when you look at the total benefits package for each employee, that actually, again, should say 1.4% total compensation package increase. And we are looking at, there had some unfilled positions that were budgeted that we're starting to fill now. We continue to have a great deal of difficulty, like many other municipalities and many other businesses, in locating certain, finding certain employees. We have been looking for a maintenance, to fill a maintenance position, to either be a driver or a mechanic. We really could use both for over a year. And I was listening to the Champlain Water District give their annual report to the town of Williston a couple of weeks ago. And he was saying that it took him 2 years to fill an electrician position. So this is not at all unusual, and we're still struggling, but we are budgeting for that. And we are hopeful, and we're going to try a couple of different approaches in trying to beef up our recruitment. Just a quick touch on the capital plan, and we always like to reiterate and acknowledge to the board that the plan is not an authorization to spend. It is how we intend to use our capital dollars and do the capital projects. But the large projects always come to the board for review and authorization. And again, we have anticipated these heavy years, certainly 3 heavy investment years back to back between 23 and 25. But really, it's the capital investments are running out to fiscal 29 or 30. So we're have a heavy year section of years, these 3 to 4 years, and then we are still going to have some additional work, mainly on our drop-off centers. We'll be doing probably 1 or so a year after 25. In 24, we're looking to improve the Milton drop-off center and the Burlington drop-off center. And again, just some new MRF site prep and activities. Those are more activities. They will be financed through the bond revenues. So there's not coming out of the capital plan, but it's a capital related project. So we're proposing for this fiscal year spend in the capital budget about 2.7 million. The balance at the end of that, if we do all of those projects, would be about 3.35 million in the capital reserve. And I do want to highlight one of the funds, essentially because the board authorized the reserve fund priority list basically everything that is, any revenue that is in excess of expenses goes into the unassigned and reserve, and then from there flows through the different reserve funds in order of that priority that is described in the packet. The one fund that we've been really keeping an eye on is the landfill post closure, and commissioners who've been on the board for a while. When I was first hired almost 7 years ago, this was the one that I highlighted as I really wanted to keep an eye on, because any landfill manager will tell you you can never have enough money in your post closure fund, and this is proving to be the case. So we are now projecting that reserve will be short by about $375,000, and the reason that we're projecting that is we are doing some really intensive analysis, investigation, and testing and of the current closed landfill, because we want to move it into custodial care. And so, backing up a little bit, when you close a landfill, the federal government requires you to maintain that landfill for a period of 30 years after it's closed, post-closure. Once you attain that 30 years past your closing, you can apply to the state for what's known as just kind of is known as custodial care, and it's a lower threshold, a lower level of care for that closed landfill. And the rationale is that by 30 years, any problems that could occur would probably have occurred. So what we're in now is in the last 3 to 4 years of our post-closure plan. And we are seeing some signs. We would have expected at this point, for example, the leachate to start have really been dropping off, and it just isn't. So we are working with some engineering firms to identify the areas that are going to need attention, and that's going to take about 18 months. So staff is working on the plan right now and doing some ongoing evaluation and testing, but we are anticipating that the fund will be short. So we will also be bringing to the board a plan to how we propose to make sure that the post-closure fund is fully funded. So that will be coming to you in the next several months. So we are hoping for adoption by the board, that you will approve that the fiscal 24 budget be submitted to our member legislative bodies for approval as presented. And again, as a reminder for some of our newer commissioners, our charter requires CSWD to for the board to authorize the budget, and then each of our legislative bodies and each of our member cities and towns must then approve our budget. And we need 50%, well, 51%. So we need 10 of our communities to approve our budget before it does become effective in the next fiscal year. So once our board approves the budget to go to our member towns, I then have 45 days to visit each town and ask for their approval. So I'm going to now stop sharing and ask for questions. Alan. Oh, Alan, you're still muted.
What is the large increase in the organics diversion facility?
So it's not necessarily a large increase at the ODF. It is rather a decrease. So it is a decrease in the revenue that we had from a couple of years ago during the COVID years. So it is the decrease in the tons due to the depackaging operation, and a decrease in sales, which is really a leveling off of the sales the high sales we experienced during COVID. We had 2 years of really robust compost product sales, as every composter did, when people were staying home through COVID and were gardening and growing their own food. So it's that combination of a resetting to pre-COVID level sales expectations, but really is the drop in the inbound tons that affected our inbound revenue.
So it's income, not expenses.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie, I wanted to give you the opportunity to offer any comments, if you care to. The Finance Committee met weekly in January and picked, wasn't entirely a line-by-line analysis, but it was a deep dive on the budget. We spent a lot of time on a number of different issues, but just give you the opportunity if you wanted to share with the commissioners any of your
Yeah, I would say I think this was a fairly challenging budget, in part because of moving out of a COVID environment into an environment of economic uncertainty. So coming up with revenue projections for the various revenue streams was challenging and could well prove to be maybe too optimistic based on recent moves by the Federal Reserve Board to continue to raise interest rates with a view to choking up the economy. Whether that will affect Chittenden County, Vermont remains to be seen. But it's a very, very difficult environment for projecting the various revenue streams. I would also say that there was a lot of grappling with the issue of changing pricing at the drop-off centers and not changing the pricing for the solid waste management fee. And that's really a larger philosophical question of principle that I think in retrospect, the Finance Committee is not the right place for that conversation. We did feel that we didn't want the DOCs to be an ongoing operation that requires constant subsidy. But whether the user fee is the right place to fund that is a question that we should all find a time to grapple with. In my view, a case can be made that raising the solid waste management fee as a deterrent to generating solid waste could be another angle, another approach for the overall budget, but I do think it requires a conversation at the board level. It's not something for the Finance Committee to make a decision on. The other thing, of course, that was very difficult is the capital budget, because we have several significant upgrade initiatives. The two DOCs, as mentioned, the Burlington and Milton, and then, the usual equipment replacement schedule, which I'm pleased to say the staff have now created a calendar for heavy equipment replacement, which should make these conversations a lot easier going forward. So I think that was a good development. There's one non-budget issue that I initially like to bring to the attention of the board, and that is the investment of idle funds. As a result of a bad experience that is now maybe 5 years ago in terms of the management of some of the investable funds that are in reserves, the district simply stopped doing that and just basically left everything in bank accounts. And now we're looking at what portion of our reserve funds we could use to place into allowable investment instruments such as treasury bills. to generate some investment revenue for the district, which is not in the budget and which is not going to be budgeted for. It will simply be a supplement if and when we succeed on this, and the finance committee is due to meet next week to dig into this conversation. But I just wanted to make the board available that this is on our horizon. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Leslie. I do have a couple of things, but I want to get commissioners out and discussing it. Paul Stabler.
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, I want to say I really liked the write-up this year. I thought staff did an excellent job. I appreciate that very much. One thing I wanted to just maybe have Nola or Sir comment on briefly. I believe you're still in the process of transitioning, you know, our budgeting and software or accounting software. And, you know, just in the past, I'll just note that it used to be a real mess. We're just doing it by spreadsheet and with links to everybody's spread, and those things would always get broken. And so it was a mess. And so could you just speak to a little bit where you are in that transition? I think it is important for future budgets, and actually it has impacted, I believe, this current. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. We are in the second year of our NetSuite transition, and this was the first full stab at the budgeting module. So we learned a lot. And my team did a great job. My managers and my budget managers did a great job of budgeting much earlier in the year than had been previously done. So our charter requires that the board present to the district a budget for the next fiscal year by December 1. And that has always been a challenge. And this year, you know, we always present a proposed budget, but it is not the actual prepared budget. This year was very close in the prepared budget to what the finance committee deliberated over. So I want to give some real strong kudos to my budget managers for utilizing the budget module in NetSuite as extensively as they did. And certainly to Nola for her training and for really the support that she provided and for pushing us into the 21st century when it comes to using these budget modules. And what they will do is make it much, much easier, not only for managers to track budget to actual in real time, but to be able to produce these kinds of reports, again, in real time for the board, for managers, and then to be able to have the budgeting process be very, very smooth, as opposed to, like you said, Paul, you know, worrying that don't touch a cell, don't touch a link, the link is broken, and it just having page after page after page after page. So this year was the first stab at it. We did notice some formatting difficulties that we will work on over the course of the next few months. But we were, because the module worked well and my team did such an excellent job, we were able to have the finance committee review the budget 2 full months earlier than had been normal. So I also want to thank the finance committee for doing a super speedy job. It was much more, much quicker than had been in the past, and you all really dedicated a lot of time, and I appreciate that. And, you know, again, the purpose of having it done by this time and having at least the proposed budget done by last month was to give our member towns adequate notice for any changes that would affect them ahead of town meeting day and ahead of their budget systems, budget processes. So that's the point for having it done in December and having our hearing done in January, to be able to allow for the member towns and cities to make any changes that they need to. So I feel that we have actually accomplished that that goal in reality for the first time in a very, very, very long time, if ever. So looking forward to even next year's budget, which we're not going to wait until September to do it. It should be something that we can do ongoing, and that's the big change that we've been making is having our budget managers get attuned to and accustomed to monitoring these things and adding things and adjusting throughout the year in preparation of the next year's budget.
And if you don't mind, Paul, just a quick follow on. I'm hoping that this new software and all will allow us in the future to better understand the expenses related to all the various materials that we handle at drop-off centers, because I personally don't believe those have to be completely self-sufficient for some materials that we handle. And I think, if I understand in the past, it's been really hard to break that out. So I'm hoping that will help us understand that in the future, and then we can come back to the board with a further discussion on the drop-off centers and how those are funded. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
And Paul Stabler, to that point, I just had a conversation with our IT director today, with John today, about, what are the questions that we need to ask so that we can make sure that we're feeding the information systems correctly, so that we can get the data out that we need to get out to be able to do the analysis we need to do. So, I want that to be an active project this year. We have a lot of data, a lot of information, but is it the right information in the right place, gathered in the right way? And we have some that we need to update. We did some not quite back of the envelope work about 20 years ago, but we first developed our process for how we price bags 25 years ago. And it might still be correct and accurate, it might not. So we're going to take some time this spring and early summer and test the current methodology, just to make sure that we're starting from the right place. So that's what I mean about, we do need to do some additional analysis. And again, the thought process, the philosophy of the board has long been that certain materials should be subsidized to encourage proper disposal. That's why the facility that receives the largest subsidy from the district is the environmental depot by design. And that has been something that the board has been very strongly in favor of, because we want to make it easy to get rid of household hazardous waste. And then other programs have been seen as, no, you need to be self-supporting. And we've seen that with the MRF and with the compost facility. So it is a good conversation to have, and it's a necessary conversation to have, to say, do we want to parse this out further? Do we want to be material by material, program by program? Is there a methodology that we want to apply, those kinds of things?
Bryn.
I have a question. Has the finance committee or the executive committee talked about having a ad hoc committee?
We haven't, but what would you propose, Bryn?
I do think it's weedy. It sounds like it's been a couple decades. I think there are a lot of factors now that are kind of beyond the materials management realm, but look at some of the equities that I think would be valuable to consider incorporate. So not that I'm excited about the idea of an ad hoc, but since it is my idea, I would want to participate in that. I do, again, I think having additional folks from the board have a deeper dive on that before it comes back to the executive committee and then to the full board would be worthwhile, because I just think having an updated plan of action with phase thresholds would be worth that investment of time.
We'll take it under advisement then. I had a couple of questions. I don't want to jump in ahead of other commissioners, but don't see any other hands up. So my first one is, I was trying to look at risk areas in a budget, and I want to go back to the average commodity revenue. I think there might have been a typo in your PowerPoint presentation, Sarah. So I wanted to clarify that, but also just to have a little bit of discussion about the ACR. My sense is that Sarah and staff turned out to be very conservative. I know I was pushing for a little bit higher, following the ACR last year. I thought that there was room to goose that up higher than what it was finally settled on in the budget, which I think is $84
Right.
per ton. But again, that deck, I think, said last year, I think it said it was in the $84 range as well, rather than 100 and something.
Well, the last year's budget was 85.
Oh, so then it's a comparison budget to budget. Okay, so the deck was correct, but I just wanted to call that out, that that's one of the riskier areas of prognostication. My sense is you have a good handle on volumes of waste and of recyclables, but it's a commodity market. It's up and down monthly.
It is. It's up and down monthly, and as I mentioned, no one saw the highs from last spring coming. We all benefited, which helped our capital reserve, but it is then now resetting back to what it had been the year before, which seems to be a bit more normalized.
Leslie, your hand is up.
Yeah, Paul, on that issue, my recollection is that when we started the budget discussions, I believe it was Josh Tyler who called our attention to what he seemed to be seeing as a slowly declining materials prices at the time that we were grappling with the issue. And that's why the finance committee was comfortable settling on an ACR close to what we were seeing, what we had in the prior year. This is just by way of letting the board understand how monitoring market conditions feeds into the budget deliberations.
That's correct.
Thanks for that clarification. I want to be clear. I'm not arguing for a higher budgeted ACR. I'm really confessing that I thought it should have been higher, and now I'm much more comfortable with the number that you settled on.
We'd love it to be higher, just not yet.
And I guess I could share with the full board. I sat in on the Casella's quarterly earnings report that it had with its financial analyst community, and they asked some questions specifically about Casella's view of the ACR going through calendar year 2023, and they saw some firming up of prices modestly in the second half of the year. So I took that was an interesting point of information, that other people who monitor this, not projecting that the floor is going to drop out from under us in terms of commodity pricing.
That's right.
I do have something else that I wanted to raise, but again, I don't want to monopolize the discussion here. But I see nobody else's hand. I just wanted to focus our board's attention again back to the drop-off centers. Two key issues, just to make sure we're aware of it. And I think this is where we as commissioners representing our communities. First off is the proposed change in operating hours. I think Sarah probably touched on it, but again, just to bring it before us, that it's potentially a major change for some customers, that we'd be going to a Tuesday through Saturday schedule for all the drop-off centers, no longer Monday at Williston. We'd be adding hours at some of the drop-off centers, but there's a change there, and I just wanted to call that out again. We want to be careful how this plays out with our respective communities. So,
right, and to that point, we only have right now 2 facilities open on Monday, so Williston and South Burlington.
right.
And we are only allowed to operate 1 day a week in Heinsberg. So that facility would remain open on Saturday only. But everywhere else, we will be adding service. So it would be Tuesday through Saturday, and everyone would have 5 days.
And I see you, Bryn, but again, you've identified some cost savings, Sarah, that we're improving service, we believe, but also there are some operational efficiencies that are achieved through this. So
absolutely. And as much as we can do at a facility when customers are not there, it's always more efficient and certainly safer for both our customers and for our employees. And it just allows us that space literally the space to be able to do the work without having to be concerned about interfering with daily business. And the schedule also provides 2 days off in a row for our operators, which I feel strongly about, particularly coming off of a very intense COVID situation where, not just physically, but mentally, our folks were stretched. So I think this provides them kind of a more normalized schedule. I think it's well deserved. It also allows for clear communication to the public. You don't have to kind of go to the checkerboard to say, okay, well, who's open where and when and what day, and Tuesday through Saturday. Much easier to communicate that one line.
Thanks, Bryn, then Alan, then Liz.
Yeah, thanks. Just as a reminder on Heinsberg, that Saturday restriction, that's because the DPW operations Monday through Friday. Okay.
Correct.
I also, I think the consistency between the facilities will be nice. I definitely have had to look up the checkerboard more than once myself. So having a better predictability there will be helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bryn. Alan, then Liz.
Since you're talking about hours, I get accosted at least once a month from a landscaper who, they go to work and they work till 3:30, 4 o'clock, and they can't get into the organics facility because it's closed. And they need to start the next day off with an empty truck. And they would like to see if there's something we can do about that issue.
Dan is still on. Dan, I know that during heavy leaf and yard season, we do have extended hours for residential drop off. And where are you? Didn't see you.
I am on.
There you are. Yes, I don't know if you want to talk about that for landscapers. Again, I know we have Sundays that are available to residents during the fall season. So we do try to.
This is the commercial guys, basically.
Yeah, the commercial guy, I know, but I didn't know if we had anything kind of similar, if there's heavy seasons, which I know there are, but landscapers.
Yeah, well, many of our changes have been delayed over the last 12 to 18 months, but one of them is the rerouting of traffic, and we've got a new person who's going to be monitoring yard waste drop off and all that. That's been very late to come. It's taken a very long time to get there, but by this summer, we anticipate having our wood waste depot relocated alongside the yard debris. And part of the expectation there is that we will be able to start earlier for that stream of material. So specifically for the landscapers, probably a half hour earlier start. So yeah, we've heard that very loud and clear, and that's the hope that by perhaps July, depending on how the other things that we're waiting to roll out finally firm up, that will be the new schedule for that material.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Liz.
Yeah, I was just going to voice my support for the consistency of Tuesday through Saturday, and also for the 2 days that provide staff the ability to have 2 days off. So that's all.
Thank you, Liz.
Elton?
I would just like to personally voice just a little concern not having an option for residents to dump off or have a place to go on Mondays. I just think it's definitely worth looking at. People do a lot of work over the weekend, clean outs, everything like that, not having somewhere to go on a Monday at any of our locations. So, there's really not many options in Chittenden County for them to go and dispose of their trash on a Monday. I would be curious to see what the usage rate is on a Monday compared to the other days of the week before I personally feel comfortable moving ahead and voting in favor of that part of this budget.
Well, I did, and you bring up two good questions. I did ask that question of Josh and Brian to say, okay, and John, let's take a look at usage on Mondays. And it's not any more or less than kind of an average day during the week. And additionally, keep in mind too, many holidays do fall on a Monday. So folks are used to having to figure something out, either hang on to materials until the next day that their local DOC is open, or to find an alternate disposal for whatever it is they must dispose of on a Monday. But generally, if we're closed on a Monday, other locations are also closed on a Monday. But we did take a look at that, and it was not this giant swell of untapped, unmet need on Monday versus any other day of the week. Josh, go ahead.
Myers is also open on Mondays from 7 to 4, as I read on their website, and they do take residential material. So that's a place that people could go if they were, looking to get rid of something on Monday.
And I'd also point out in the board packet on page 81, you actually have the chart of January and February well, it says January 2013 to February 2023. I'm not sure if that's correct. But anyway, the trip count per day of week is in the packet.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd still like to express my just concern with that move. I don't think I just don't see it as positive to raise our rates and then cut a service day out. I know there are other options between Myers, the Casella facility, and Richmond as well, but I just still think or actually I don't know if Richmond's open that day, but I just think it's tough to cut out an entire service day in the middle of the week for people to dispose of their residential trash, bulky waste, and everything like that.
And just a reminder for the board that the hours aren't actually a part of the budget. It was really informational that this is what we're looking to do. So it wasn't necessarily budget related, other than to showcase some efficiencies and the economies and why we needed 2 additional drop-off center operators.
Additional discussion on the budget.
Josh Espy, could you mute yourself, please? Kelton?
Sorry, I just didn't take my hand down. That's the only thing I had. Thank you.
Thanks. Left over hand. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this budget? Bryn.
I just wanted to revisit in your slide deck. You said a 12% decrease in the budget for promotion and outreach, I think. What's the reasoning for the reduction there?
So most of that is actually salaries and wages and benefits. So Michelle Morris is retiring, and part of her duties are being transferred to a new position that we hope to hire in the IT department. So she had taken on Nancy Plunkett's duties, Nancy retired the year before, and Nancy was working on special projects, research, data analysis. She did the household survey. She did work on SWIP. She did work on the solid waste management fee analysis. Those duties would transfer to this new person, who would also be able to assist in database building, database analysis, and helping John, we were such things as going out to the drop-off centers, making sure the cameras are working, other kind of IT related things. So the reduction in that budget is mostly related to that. There's also some readjustments and rethinking of where we're spending our advertising dollars and being more strategic and focused, and kind of getting away from some of the more traditional usage, not focusing on TV, for example, using radio less, and really doing some more targeted work with still doing some TV, but it's more targeted with cable, more targeted to social media, things of that nature. So kind of a little bit of a combination.
Rick.
If, assuming that the board approves the increase in the bag fees and the changes in the drop-off center hours, it feels like there's going to need to be some pretty aggressive messaging that's going on, particularly given that there had been some concerns raised about, well, we approved this new MRF, and of course the rates are going to go up. And sure enough, the rates are going up, and we know that that's not due to the MRF, but that's not the conclusion that some people are going to jump to. Can you speak a little bit to the way that you might approach that messaging? I'm sure you've discussed that.
Yeah, it's a great point, and there's been a lot of conversation, among managers and how do we kind of convey that completely separate from the new MRF, which is not built yet. We haven't even paid any bill on it yet. Is that all of our costs for all of our facilities have gone up, just like everyone's costs have gone up over the past 2-3 years pretty dramatically. Our costs for fuel, our costs for transportation, the benefits, the healthcare benefits have gone up, workers' comp has gone up, everything is rising. And we've held off on the increases through the bulk of COVID, so we wouldn't adversely affect folks who were being in a tight spot during the bulk of it. But we do, again, if we're keeping with the philosophy of having our facilities be self-supporting, have to recognize that we do need to recover some of these increases somehow. And we do have multiple ways we can do it. And to Leslie's point, we could really significantly raise the solid waste management fee that the haulers pay at Coventry to eliminate across the board subsidies. It would have to be an extremely large increase to do that, in the $10 to $12 a ton range. We hear screams about that for sure. There are other ways, and we put out a couple of different options of how to approach the needs for different facilities, but in that DOC memo, there are a couple of different ways we could address it. And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about doing is saying, our bag pricing, particularly on the smallest bag, has been underpriced for a long time now. And we're kind of right sizing that bag. The other two are, can we moderate that? Maybe not. If we want to, it would have to go back to handling coins, and we could think about that. But we're hopeful that the balance in the increased hours and days of operation will help to kind of offset that modest increase in the fee. We've actually heard from some of our customers that they feel that the prices are too low. We definitely have heard from the operators that there's a sense that we are not covering enough of our costs. And in comparison to curbside service where that is available, we are still a very, very affordable option. And I think we will have customers who will continue to do that math. And some may decide that the curbside option is better for them, but I think most will stay with us because we really are an affordable way for residents in particular to manage their solid waste. So we will point out, the pros. This may be seen as a con, but we will certainly point out the pros and what we're trying to do and how we're doing it.
Yeah, my point is simply that I think that'll need to be done very deliberately and cautiously for the sake of a certain portion of the population, at least.
Yes.
So thank you.
Agreed. Thank you.
Liz.
Yeah, I just had two questions, and it's a little bit in the weeds, but a question just about, you've mentioned, Sarah, that the pre-COVID price for a small bag was $2.75. Now it may be $3. What are the costs before pre-COVID for the middle and the large one, just as a point of reference? Not that I'm too concerned about it, but I also do, as a person who's in a 2-person household, think about, and I do the math about getting an outside hauler versus going to the DOC and understanding like my own fiscal responsibility of how much garbage we make and recycling and taking those things. So I'm just putting that out there that the people who are already doing that probably are going to continue to do that. And I hear Richard's point though as well. I think it is potentially a messaging, but if we all understand what the costs pre-COVID are, and everybody knows things are going up, you just have to go to the grocery store to understand prices increasing across the board. But I think knowledge of what pre-COVID pricing was and where we may be is an important part for me anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I have some numbers in my head that I think I remember from 3 years ago. Josh, Tyler, I don't know if you would remember, or Nola. Again, the small bag was $2.75. I want to say the medium bag was $5.50, and the large bag I want to say was $7.25. Was it $7.25 or $7.50? I know we went up to the next whole number on the medium and the large, and went down to the next whole number on the small. After we stopped the $10 round fee, $20 round fee. But I will get that specific information unless Nola can look it up super fast. I don't see. Hold on. I think she had to drop off, but I will get that information for you. It's a great point.
Bryn?
Can you just refresh my memory on where we are with the credit card installations?
Another conversation that Josh Tyler and I had this morning. Yeah, so Josh, I'm going to kick it over to you. I'm sorry, because you've got all the updated information and you know the kind of the pitfalls that we're currently facing.
So currently we upgraded all of our facility internet connections so that we could actually run credit cards continuously without interruption. That was completed probably in the fall of this last year, so 22. Right now we're looking at vetting which credit card we use. We have taken credit cards at Heinsberg. We use Cayenne. That was kind of a pilot to see how expensive they were per transaction. It is relatively high. I know Nola is looking into what other companies are out there, and John Dorward has done a lot of work that will work with our point of sale system, which is Keystroke. We also have a back end because we're using NetSuite on how to get that data kind of reconcile,
flow in and
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of where we're at. We got a couple more, I'd say a month or two before my goal is to roll it out as soon as possible. I'd like to see it July 1, but we do have some pretty key back of the house needs to be reconciled first. So we're close, but we're getting there.
I know I've been saying this for probably 5 years. Coming soon, we're almost there. Coming soon, we're almost there. And
Progress, it's happening. You're closer than you were 4 years ago.
We are significantly closer, and a lot of that work was done by John Dorward to make sure that, as Josh said, that the network would not be interrupted, because that is a federal requirement, that nothing get in that way between the split seconds that it takes to make the transaction happen. So that has been accomplished. That alone took a lot of work. Particularly for Williston for some reason and for Essex. So that has been done. We can get the units as far as the swiper units, anytime. And it really is making sure that the costs, and thank you, Josh, for that, you sparked all the memory, for the fees that are associated with taking those cards can be kept as low as possible, because in this budget, we do have it's not quite a pass through, but we're trying to recover some of those fees. And if we can lower that as much as possible, we can either, again, that might be part of the subsidy that we just say this is part of the cost of doing business, or any fee that we charge out to customers will just be the minimum, and most minimum we can charge.
I just wanted to reinforce that the intent would be that the customer using a credit card would actually pay for the privilege of using that, and it would not be spread to those who pay cash.
That is correct. That is the intent.
Rick?
I'm just looking at the Wayback Machine, and according to it, the drop-off center fees, and I think it was April of 2018, were $250 for an 18-gallon bag, $475 for a 33, and $725 for a 45.
I think that was 2018.
That's what I think I asked it for.
And I think 2019, they went up by
I do.
25 cents or something.
I did grab that, Sarah. I was going to put it in the chat, but Rick was right on the FY19, FY20. I have 275, 525, and 750.
Okay, that's close. Thank you, Amy.
Mike,
Yeah, are debit cards allowed?
They will be, I believe, right, Josh? That's what we're looking at, debit, but debit as a charge. So
Exactly. As long as they're
debit-
backed by a Visa or a MasterCard, they'll be allowed. We're taking those currently at the Heinsberg Center,
yeah.
which I think is pretty ubiquitous through all debit cards right now, that they switched over to not just only debit. And it's a lesser expense to us if we run it as a credit card, which is what we do.
It's lesser as a credit card than it's as a debit card.
To the district, as I understand it. Now, don't quote me on that. How about this? I will look that back up, but I remember we had a conversation, and I think that it is less financially restrictive on the person taking the card if you run it as a credit card.
Okay. The only thing I was wondering about, I guess, along those lines is that sometimes you are presented with an option that you pay cash, then, it's cheaper. I don't know if those are, I have to imagine it adds complication in and of itself, but that, it's just an option to, if we want to avoid the fees of the credit card, and apparently so the debit card, then that's just a thought.
Right, there are some locations there, like some gas stations, you go inside, you pay cash, you get, 5% off or something like that. So that is the way that those institutions are covering those costs of accepting the credit cards. You're right.
okay, additional discussion on the budget. We're getting close to our scheduled hour, but this is a very important discussion to have and an important decision we're about to make. I don't want to cut off discussion. I think then we might be ready for a motion to approve the budget as presented.
So moved. Bryn, Winooski.
Second, South Burlington.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the FY24 budget as presented. Is there further discussion on the budget or on this motion?
Yeah, a quick question, Paul. Does
Rick.
this mean that we're approving the reduced hours on the drop off with this vote?
Well, again, that is not a budget item. That was that's essentially an operational decision. So it's not, the hours aren't contingent on the budget.
So it's not voting in favor of that necessarily.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Rick.
So to be clear, by passing the budget as proposed, that is including changing the tip fee, changing the drop-off center bag fees. That's all part and parcel of the budget, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And to be clear, the board is authorizing the budget to be presented to our member cities and towns for their official approval.
So it's not official yet until we get that past that threshold.
That's right.
Other discussion on the motion? I think we are ready then to vote on the motion, which is
Just a weighted vote.
yes.
Yes, all votes are weighted votes. Yes.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, for the newer members, their towns representing a larger population have a weighted vote that's higher than towns with a lighter population.
I think you should just clarify. I mean, our vote here is the board is weighted, but I think the towns, it's one vote per town, and we need a majority of towns.
Yes, that is correct.
Right, okay.
That's right.
Other discussion? Again, it's been moved and seconded to approve the FY24 budget as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, Wilson.
Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? No, this board has approved the proposed budget, Sarah.
Thank
Ready
you very
to move
much.
forward.
Thank you, everyone.
And again, thank you, everybody, staff, Sarah, Finance Committee for putting in umpteen hours to get us to this point. Thank you very much. And again, with the reassurance to the towns that there is no assessment that will be made to them should this budget be adopted.
Correct.
We're now ready to move on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is other business. Is there any other business to be brought before the board tonight? The only item I would have is that we have a tentative meeting scheduled for March 22nd. I think Sarah and I can convene and discuss and see if we need to still have that meeting, and we'll inform the full board via email as to whether or not that meeting will happen.
And if we have it, you won't be there, Paul?
I will not be there, so you will be in the very capable hands of Alan Nye as our vice chair. All right, I hear nothing else to come up under other business. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Jericho.
Seconded, Essex
Junction.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye,
Adjourn. We are-